On a quiet Monday, Boeing stunned the world by halting all 737 MAX production. Not from technical failure, but the escalating U.S.-China trade war. Beijing's sweeping ban on new Boeing orders in response to U.S. tariffs instantly froze a quarter of Boeing's global market. Thousands of workers were sent home, their futures uncertain as the shutdown rippled through the American heartland. The shutdown exposed the deep interdependence and vulnerability of U.S. industries to global economic conflict. The consequences would be felt for years, not just at Boeing, but across the entire U.S. industrial base. The shutdown was more than a headline, it was a warning. To understand this crisis, we must trace the trade war's origins. It began with U.S. concerns over intellectual property theft and a ballooning trade deficit. In 2018, the Trump administration imposed tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Chinese goods, sparking immediate retaliation from Beijing. What started as targeted measures quickly escalated into a full-blown economic war, with hundreds of billions in goods affected. China struck back, targeting U.S. agriculture, especially soybeans, to maximize political pain. Despite negotiations and a temporary Phase 1 deal, tensions simmered. The pandemic shifted focus, but the core disputes remained. The Biden administration kept most tariffs, signaling a continued hard line. New flashpoints emerged: advanced technology and semiconductors. The U.S. imposed strict export controls, aiming to curb China's tech ambitions. By mid-2025, the U.S. announced a sweeping 25% tariff on all remaining Chinese imports, hoping to force concessions. China's response was swift and severe: a ban on Boeing aircraft, targeting a high-value American industry. This move showed China's willingness to absorb pain to inflict strategic damage. The ban fundamentally changed the conflict, leading directly to Boeing's shutdown. The trade war had evolved from tariffs to a battle for industrial and technological dominance. The stakes were no longer abstract. They were measured in lost jobs and shuttered factories. The crisis had reached a new, dangerous phase. China's retaliation was no accident. It was a calculated strategy. Knowing it couldn't match U.S. tariffs dollar for dollar, Beijing targeted industries deeply reliant on the Chinese market. Agriculture was first, hitting U.S. farmers where it hurt most. The goal: create economic pain and political pressure in key American regions. Billions in U.S. farm aid couldn't mask the damage. The Boeing ban marked a major escalation, striking at the heart of American manufacturing. Aviation is a crown jewel, and China is one of Boeing's largest markets. By shutting out Boeing, China sent a message: access to its market is a privilege, not a right. The move also signaled a long-term shift. China is accelerating efforts to reduce dependence on U.S. technology. The Made in China 2025 initiative is building domestic champions in robotics, aerospace, and more. COMAC, China's state-backed aircraft maker, is being fast-tracked to compete with Boeing and Airbus. The crisis will only speed up COMAC's rise within China. China's strategy is clear: inflict short-term pain, achieve long-term self-sufficiency. The message to U.S. companies is unmistakable: China can and will weaponize its market access. The trade war is no longer just about tariffs. It's about who will dominate the industries of the future. The U.S. must now reckon with a rival playing the long game. The balance of global power is shifting. The fallout for Boeing was swift and brutal. Its stock plunged, but the real blow was losing a quarter of its commercial market overnight. Billions in future revenue vanished, and undelivered planes piled up. Halting 737 MAX production was the only option to stem the losses. Over 12,000 workers at the Renton plant faced an uncertain future. The shutdown handed a massive advantage to Airbus, as Chinese airlines turned to Europe for new aircraft. Once those contracts are signed, Boeing may never reclaim that market share. The crisis reignited doubts about Boeing's long-term viability and its ability to weather geopolitical storms. The company's fate, and that of its workers, now hinged on the outcome of a global economic conflict. Boeing's grounding was a stark warning. No company is immune from the crossfire of international politics. Boeing's shutdown sent shockwaves through its vast supply chain. Over 600 U.S. suppliers, from Spirit Aerosystems in Kansas to GE Aviation in Ohio, saw orders evaporate overnight. For many, Boeing was their largest customer. Now thousands of jobs were at risk. The pain rippled far beyond the Pacific Northwest, threatening communities nationwide. The economic multiplier was brutal. Every lost Boeing job meant 3 or 4 more lost in the wider economy. Restaurants, logistics firms, and local shops all felt the impact. The just-in-time manufacturing model, once praised for efficiency, proved dangerously fragile. Suppliers were left with useless inventory and mounting losses. Bankruptcies loomed, threatening to permanently weaken America's industrial base. The Boeing crisis exposed a critical vulnerability in modern manufacturing. The damage would last long after the assembly lines stopped. While Boeing dominated headlines, U.S. farmers had been suffering for years. China was once the top buyer of American soybeans. Nearly a third of the crop went there. When Beijing imposed tariffs in 2018, that market vanished overnight. Prices crashed, and farmers in Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota faced financial ruin. Many had borrowed heavily, expecting steady Chinese demand. The U.S. government's billions in aid were a bandage, not a cure. Meanwhile, Brazil and Argentina filled the gap, signing long-term deals with China. Even if the trade war ended, U.S. farmers wouldn't simply win back lost ground. The damage was likely permanent, with entrenched new competitors. The latest escalation only deepened the crisis, spreading uncertainty to pork, cotton, and more. For America's heartland, the trade war replaced stability with anxiety. The consequences would echo for a generation. The trade war's third front is technology, especially semiconductors. These microchips power everything from smartphones to missiles. The U.S. leads in chip design. China is the world's biggest buyer. Washington used export controls to block Chinese access to advanced chips, targeting firms like Huawei. China responded by pouring billions into its own semiconductor industry, aiming for self-sufficiency. The tech Cold War put U.S. chip makers like Qualcomm and NVIDIA at risk of losing a crucial market. The latest escalation saw China restrict exports of rare earth elements, vital for high-tech manufacturing. With China dominating global supply, this move threatened U.S. industries from electric vehicles to defense. The tech conflict raised the stakes for both economies. The battle for semiconductor supremacy could fragment the global technology ecosystem. The risks for U.S. innovation and security were growing. The trade war was now a fight for control of the future. The outcome would shape the next era of global power. The stories of Boeing farmers and tech firms are just the beginning. The trade war is now dragging down the entire U.S. economy. GDP growth has slowed to its weakest in years, with economists blaming trade uncertainty. The manufacturing sector is already in recession, as shown by months of sub-50 PMI readings. The Boeing shutdown will push these numbers even lower. Tariffs are raising prices for everyday goods, squeezing consumers. The Federal Reserve faces a dilemma: raise rates to fight inflation, or risk letting it spiral. Consumer confidence is falling as households worry about the future. The trade deficit hasn't shrunk as hoped. Importers are just shifting to other countries. Meanwhile, government spending on aid is rising and tax revenues are falling. The result: a worsening fiscal outlook and mounting national debt. The trade war's costs are everywhere, on factory floors, in farm fields, and in family budgets. The risks to America's economic health are growing by the day. The trade war's path is clear, from tariffs to the shutdown of an American icon. China's strategic retaliation has exposed deep vulnerabilities in U.S. industry. Boeing's grounding is a national event, not just a corporate crisis. The ripple effects threaten jobs, businesses, and entire communities. Farmers face the permanent loss of their largest market. The tech battle risks fragmenting the global economy. The evidence is undeniable. The trade war is inflicting real, lasting damage. The core issue is now a clash of economic systems and visions for the future. The crisis forces America to rethink its industrial base and global strategy. The question now: how must U.S. industry rebuild to compete and thrive in a changed world?